And welcome to Hannity. Tonight, it is his first cable interview, and in a moment, I'll be joined by former Defense Secretary Robert Gates to respond to the explosive revelations that are made in his brand new tell-all memoir. But first, last week, the political world was buzzing after several passages of Gates' book were released, and in particular, most were shocked about some of the things that he witnessed during his time in the Obama administration.
First, from the Fox News deck this afternoon, damage control from the White House.
The White House today on the defensive after excerpts were released. A new memoir offers a devastating critique of President Obama.
There is a lot in the book that could be very damaging.
Did you ever confront the president about his lack of passion for that mission at that time?
I did talk to the president about the need to speak out about the importance of the war and why it was important for the troops to be there.
He never really had a passion for pursuing the war in Afghanistan, and that kind of bothered you.
It's one thing to tell the troops that you support them. It's another to work at making them believe that you believe, as president, that their sacrifice is worth it. President Bush did that. I did not see President Obama do that. It was this absence of passion, this absence of a conviction of the importance of success that disturbed me. Where I had a particular problem with the vice president was in his encouragement of suspicion of the military and the senior military with the president. And I think it's fair to say that the book is a lot more critical about the people around the president than it is of the president himself.
And joining me now to explain more is the author of the brand new book, Duty, Memoirs of a Secretary of War, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. It's an honor to have you here. I don't want to make you stretch out. Your neck okay?
Yeah, I tripped on a rug. I wish it were something more adventuresome, but I tripped on a rug and cratered.
Before we get to all the politics, and there's a lot, and you have a lot of observations about the president, the vice president, Hillary, Congress you're not very fond of. One thing that struck me about you is something that you did every night as Secretary of Defense before you went to bed. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
I want you to tell the audience what you did.
Obviously, every evening I had to write condolence letters to the families of those who had been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would sign them at first, and then very quickly started writing handwritten notes. And then I was very concerned that they not become statistics for me. And so with each package that would come to me, I asked for all the hometown news, the accounts, and the interviews with their parents and their families, their brothers and sisters, and their coaches and teachers, and so on. So I got to know a little bit about each one of these mainly young people who had made the supreme sacrifice for our country. And there were stories of kids from wealthy families who chose to serve because they felt they owed it to the country, kids who were aimless and found direction in life in the military, how they liked to fish and hunt and do things like that. And so I felt like I knew them as individuals, and that became very emotional for me.
You told, and every night you cried, or most every night.
Yeah.
You'll tell a story about how you went, I think, to a burn unit. I think it was at either Bethesda or Walter Reed, and you had a hard time.
Well, actually the Army's burn unit in San Antonio, and I turned to General Corelli, who later became Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, and he was my senior military assistant, and we were on our way to the hospital, and I was going to see the amputees and so on, and I said to him, I said, I don't think I can do the burn unit. I don't think I'm strong enough. And at that time, there were a lot of kids in the burn unit because they were in these Humvees that were becoming funeral pyres for them. And he didn't say anything, and a couple of minutes passed, and I said, do they think I'm coming? And he said, yes, sir. I said, well, then I have to do it. And amazingly, I walk in the rehab unit, and who's the first kid I lay eyes on is a young man who was a Marine first lieutenant, and I had handed him his diploma when I was president of Texas A&M, and I ended up signing his deployment order And here he is with his wife and his little baby, and he asked me to give him his medal at Texas A&M.
Pretty touching. Well, it speaks volumes about you and how much you care and how much we all ought to give thanks for these brave men and women. Moving on to the Commander-in-Chief. He doubts the course that he charted in Afghanistan, doesn't believe in our strategy. He's skeptical, if not outright convinced, it would fail. That's President Obama?
My concern, it was an evolutionary process. I believe that when he made the decision on the surge, which I believe was a courageous decision because it was against the advice of all of his political advisors and virtually everybody else in the White House, I'm convinced he believed that the strategy would work. As we went through 2010, I think in particular, the civilian side of the strategy, the non-military side of the strategy, clearly was not working. We were not changing Pakistan's hedging strategy. We were not making the Afghan government less corrupt or more effective. We weren't getting enough civilians into the field to help. Our military operations, such as at Marja, were taking longer and were tougher than originally anticipated. And so I think he had these reservations. I will give him credit. As late as December 2010, he was still going out in front of the public and announcing the results of the latest review and saying, you know, we're moving ahead, we're doing a good job, we're accomplishing what we set out to do. But I think behind the scenes, he was continually worried that the thing wasn't working and expressed those concerns in large groups as well as face-to-face.
Let me put up on the screen something that you quote in the book. You said, where this lack of passion mattered most for me was Afghanistan. When soldiers put their lives on the line, they need to know that the commander-in-chief who sent them in harm's way believes in their mission. They need him to talk often to them and the country, not just to express gratitude for their service and sacrifice, but also to explain and affirm why that sacrifice is necessary, why their fight is noble, why their cause is just, and why they must prevail. President Obama never did that. And when you put that together with he was, if not outright convinced it would fail, if I'm a parent and that's my kid, and the defense secretary is telling me he's sending him into a war that he's convinced is going to fail, what are they thinking?
Well, I hope that what they will see is that the decisions he made, he stuck to. He continued with the surge. He did as he said he would do. He said he was going to start, that we would end our combat presence there in December of 2014. And I think that the key is to focus on the actions here and the fact that he sustained this effort despite his reservations. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why I was comfortable continuing to work for him.
Why when the military leaders requested, I think it was either 50 or 60,000 troops or risk failure, I'll never forget those words, then the term dithering was used. Remember that point?
Yeah.
And then the president decided only 30,000. Now, if your commanders tell you they need 50 or 60,000 and you give them 30 or you risk failure, did that trouble you?
The commanders, both in Iraq, in terms of the drawdown in Iraq, but also in terms of the buildup in Afghanistan, gave the president three choices. The one that General McChrystal felt most comfortable with was actually a request for 80,000 troops. An alternative that had some higher risk of achieving the mission was 40,000, and then there was a much smaller option that he submitted as well. And the president, we debated this long and hard, and the reality was that we couldn't get the last units involved in the 40,000 request into Afghanistan for at least a year in any event. So I think I played a role in persuading the president to authorize at least 30,000, give me some wiggle room for enablers such as medevac and intelligence and surveillance, reconnaissance, ordnance disposal, and so on, and then go to the allies to try to get them to make up the difference between that and 40,000. And this is one of those occasions where the allies came through.
You talked about a contentious relationship between the president and the military. At one point you described the president being pretty angry. If I'm being gamed, was the phrase you used. And then you also write that the president, you said, as I sat there, I thought the president doesn't trust his commander and can't stand the Afghani president, Karzai. For him, it's all about getting out. So how can we fight a mission if the commander-in-chief doesn't believe or trust his commanders? And I mean, that's breathtaking to me as an outsider. Maybe I just don't have enough inside game in me.
I think that the problem was that a variety, the real problem in terms of the president's suspicion of the military, and I talk about this in the book at some length, is that various military leaders, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, General Petraeus, and General McChrystal, during the debate in the White House, made various public statements that in essence the White House interpreted as boxing the president in or putting public pressure on him to adopt their recommendations. And I believed that that was not an orchestrated effort to pressure the president. But as I say in the book, I could see how some in the White House could believe that. And I was never able to persuade the president that it wasn't an orchestrated effort, as he would put it, to jam him on the recommendations for the surge.
All right, we're going to come back. We'll continue with Secretary Gates. I think the most explosive allegation you make in the book is about Hillary Clinton. We'll get to that. And also, he has the unique perspective of having worked for both President Bush and President Obama. So we'll talk more with Defense Secretary Gates right after this. And then later, I'll be joined by a distinguished studio audience. They're going to react to this interview with the former Secretary of Defense as Hannity continues.